right. A very good afternoon to all our Indian and Asian colleagues, and a very good morning to all our European colleagues joining us today. I, Priya Vijay Kumar Pujari, lecturer at the Manipal Center for European Studies, the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence at Manipal Academy of Higher Education. Manipal welcome you all to the inaugural session of the 6-day winter school titled EU-Asia Relations in a Multipolar World. Today, as we meet, not only in the shadows of a possible third wave of the coronavirus pandemic hitting our country, but also in the context of numerous global geopolitical churnings. While the last week, as you all know, was phenomenal as the world's largest free trade agreement, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, that is as it is famously known, came into effect. And this week, we are to witness intense diplomatic negotiations among Washington, Brussels, and Moscow, starting this morning, I believe. Amidst this geopolitical and geoeconomical churnings, Europe and Asia, two very important regional powers, are trying to redefine their role in what we witness and deem a multipolar world. A European Union that had shied away from power politics for such a long time has now donned the political cap, taking on a geopolitical role, enhancing its resilience and strategic autonomy, while simultaneously attempting to strengthen the rules-based multilateral order. And now, with the global political landscape in flux, dominated by the pandemic, competition, technological changes, economic nationalism, populism, shifting norms, and new security threats, there is definite call for more coherent and effective external action from the EU. Similarly, Asia is the fastest growing region in the world and the largest source of global GDP. China, which is the world's second largest economy, has become a major agent of development for the rest of the world through its expansive Belt and Road Initiative and foreign direct investments into emerging markets. While India, the world's sixth largest economy, boasts of world-leading industries such as information technology, services, and pharmaceuticals. And on the other hand, Southeast Asian economies are steadily transforming, thereby raising expectations that the realization of the Asian century is here. It is thus time we probe the powerful underlying trends that underpin Europe and Asia's future, well beyond the immediate aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. We believe these trends will be felt for many years to come, not only in Asia and Europe, but across the world, and will help define the political and economic contours of the 21st century. And these developments warrant a forward-looking and thought-provoking discussion. And thus, here we are today to debate over the complex and multifarious relations between the European Union and Asia. With this, may I now invite Professor Neeta Inamdar, Head of Manipal Center for European Studies, MAHE, to welcome everybody. Just to briefly introduce Professor Inamdar, who is a Jean Monnet Chair and also the head of the Manipal Center for European Studies. She has led this center since its inception in 2009 and has the credit of building to what it is today, a Jean Monnet Center of Excellence. With this, may I invite Professor Neeta Inamdar. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Priya, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, all colleagues from India, and good morning to European colleagues. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this one-week winter school on EU-Asia relations in a multipolar world. How I wish we could all meet in person here in Manipal, all resource persons and participants. This event was planned 4 years ago when we submitted our application for the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence. And we had definitely imagined at that time that we would all meet in person and discuss and deliberate about EU-Asia relations here in Manipal. However, due to the situation with the pandemic, we decided to go ahead with this online mode of deliberating on this very important idea. My very special welcome to Mr. Niccolò Rinaldi, Head of Unit Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, Director General for External Policies of the Union, European Parliament, and our colleague, Professor Hwee, Director of the European Union Centre in Singapore and Adjunct Fellow at S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Singapore. She has also been with us and with our colleagues who have been curating this 5-day winter school. So just as Priya said earlier, the 5-day winter school is designed to rigorously analyze and estimate the direction in which the EU-Asia relations are headed. The idea is also to explore conceptually what multipolarity holds for this world. Just as Priya shared, already there are a lot of things happening, including RSIS and many other negotiations in the very week itself. So will that make relations more unpredictable in the times to come, with geoeconomic and geopolitical situations changing the dynamics with many unilateral engagements coming to fore in recent times? We are going to discuss all this and more in the 5-day winter school. Understanding EU-Asia relations of today requires that we make sense of the historical connects that the two regions have had, the civilizational connect, if at all existed, and the dynamics surrounding that. One also needs to examine if there are any burdens of the past that would determine the future of relations between the two. One thing is true, that for being geographically distant, the security considerations are not pressing for engagement between EU and Asia. However, the size and the significance of both economies and their interdependence in recent years makes case for an economic and commercial rationale for deeper engagements. Both of them have great stakes in international economic order and mutual interest. If superficially analyzed, this may appear to be mainly commercial today. However, there is a growing focus on Indo-Pacific, which has largely replaced the Asia-Pacific narrative. The entire world seems to be betting its fortunes on Indo-Pacific and developments therein. The rise of Asia in general in 1980s, the unabated rising ambitions of China in the last couple of decades, its confrontations with the US, its self-assertion and attempts to reconfigure the world order, challenging the Western dominance of global economic governance, have disrupted the conventional geopolitical considerations. Just as this is happening at an unprecedented pace, the European Union finds itself caught up mostly with the domestic challenges. Fortress Europe has had to channelize most of its energy towards addressing the internal challenges that it is faced with in recent decades, from systemic crisis of the euro to sovereign debt crisis, followed by a refugee crisis, Brexit, anti-EU sentiments among its people, growing nationalism, rise of right-wing, rule of law challenges, and populism gaining momentum in some parts that have taken it from, that have shaken it from within, affecting its very core, the supposed core, the European values. No wonder that some of the scholars have gone on to the extent of referring to Europe in 21st century as a continent in decline and a union in crisis. Nevertheless, EU has been able to overcome some of them due to its meticulous planning and institutional responses in handling some of them. It was also assisted in a way with the rise in FDI flow from Asia to Europe that assisted economic recovery post-Eurozone crisis. There have been issues related to EU's political capital, particularly in common external representation of its interest through European diplomatic services, especially in light of disagreements that exist among the member states. However, EU seems to attempt a comeback and regain its position through institutionalized responses, taking cue from the way it handled Eurozone crisis. EU single market is the world's largest single market even today and continues to be functional, though there are challenges at times when it has to maintain open internal borders and also protect common external borders. EU is also at the forefront of global agreements to combat climate change and it is also the biggest donor of development aid. Most of this action is through developing institutional frameworks for action. This probably works within the way EU is structured, but to assume that the same works well everywhere would be an overestimation. Institutionalizing interregional cooperation and dialogue is a European approach that still needs resonance from the rest of the world. EU's arrival into the Asian scene is already seen as something quite late. Within that, the way it is cautiously treading to balance its relations with China is something to watch out for. Sinatra Doctrine, as Mr. Joseph Borrell describes it, as being independent of the US antagonism towards China, with a two-pillar approach that defines its approach towards Asia in general. This has meant continuing cooperation with China to address global challenges like climate change, COVID-19, regional conflict, and at the same time, strengthening EU's strategic sovereignty by protecting technological sectors of the economy. EU has a major stake in Asian security, as any conflict would impact global supply chain. Though it sought institutionalizing collaboration with Asia through ASEAN in last 25 years, ASEAN's core principles of informality, flexibility, consensus, equal partnership, and mutual benefit have not been able to deliver more than attracting 50 odd members to it. That has also made it more ceremonial. Its success across three pillars, political, economic, and social needs a careful analysis. However, in past 20 years, EU has developed partnership with individual countries and multilateral agreements, also with regional groupings. EU's bilateral strategic partnership with the Asian countries, particularly China and India, set up dialogue architecture covering a wide range of issues and formalizing regular contact through regular summit meetings with political leadership, ministerial meetings, high-level committees, working groups across pillars of political, economic, trade, and people-to-people dialogues. It is finally to counter BRI that connectivity has come to the top of foreign policy agenda of all global powers, including the EU. India-EU Connectivity Partnership of 2021 is thus EU's effort aimed to encourage multipolarity. As EU member states, particularly Germany, France, and the Netherlands, found focus on Indo-Pacific in recent years, they were also able to have EU-Asia connectivity strategy supported by the financial instrument, NDICI. However, the challenges are in plenty to this newfound interest. Some of them are largely to do with the differing worldviews that the two regions have. Disputes about human rights, disagreements about environmental standards, questions of values and norms, and importantly, ideas of sovereignty, which is non-negotiable for Asian states. To add to these are internal fragmentations within EU and the bureaucratization that pose everyday challenges. It is also due to the diversity that exists within Asia, and that EU has to modify its approach to every state within Asia and being separated. Except for ASEAN, it cannot find a counter-regional structure that it can easily relate to. This is precisely the reason it is trying to support ASEAN providing technical assistance. However, there are limitations on the symmetry between institutional capacities of ASEAN and the EU. Importantly, EU's external relations are driven by normative concerns. The key statement on European External Action Service states, and I quote, "The EU's main objective in Asia is to help engender the political and the social stability of the region, promoting policies to assist in maintaining as much as possible its high rates of economic growth, also the benefit of Europe's own economy and citizens." Unquote. This statement comes as surprising to the Asian giants, especially when the majority member states within EU are having trade deficits with major Asian powers, particularly China. In an informal reference, an Asian diplomat was quoted saying, "Until EU comes down from its high horse, it will not see success in its relations with Asia," unquote. Some others have suggested if it cannot leave behind its normativity, It should at least soften it and deal with Asian states with more sensitivity and with a realistic approach. I'm sure there will be deliberations on all aspects involved in EU-Asia relations, including those centered on changing dynamics within Indo-Pacific, blue economy, global gateway strategy, challenges in South China Sea, climate change, green future, health in EU-Asia relations, changes taking place in global connectivity industry, digital governance, 2030 digital compass, and many, many other things. My colleagues Priya and Yatharth Kachiyar have put in a lot of work in curating this 5-day event. I acknowledge the hard work they have put into this and wish them all the success. I welcome all resource persons and participants once again. May you all have an engaging and enriching 5-day deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Neeta. In fact, you've set the context and the tone for the entire winter school. Some of the, let's say, discussions that you briefly touched upon will be, of course, discussed and deliberated further, in fact, deconstructed, broken down in our upcoming sessions for the next 6 days. And with this, now may I invite, we're very happy that we're joined by Dr. Hwee, who is the Director of the European Union Center in Singapore. She's also a Senior Research Fellow at the Singapore Institute of International Affairs, Adjunct Fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, and also the Adjunct Faculty at the Singapore Management University. Since 2011, she is the Co-Editor-in-Chief for the Asia-Europe General. Hwee is a leading expert on EU-Asia relations. In fact, she was also one of the very first persons that both I and Yatharth reached out to for our winter school, and she has constantly helped us curate this program. So over to you, Hwee. Maybe a few words from you to our participants.
Thank you, Priya. Very good afternoon, Professor Inamdar, Priya, distinguished guests and participants, and a very good morning to my good friend Gudrun in Berlin. First, I would like to thank the Manipal Center for European Studies, and in particular, Professor Inamdar and Priya, for involving me in the discussion and contributing towards the planning of this winter school. I'm looking forward to engaging in discussions with the participants on Friday and Saturday on the challenges and way forward for EU-Asia cooperation. The theme for this winter school on EU-Asia relations in a multipolar world could not be more timely and relevant. The broad theme chosen for this winter school reflects not only the importance but the urgency for the EU and countries in Asia and regional organizations such as the Association of Southeast Asian Nations to strengthen cooperation in the midst of rising geopolitical tensions. The EU and its partners in Asia can and must become more attuned to each other's developments in each other's regions and play a more active role at a time when global politics and economics are being reconfigured. If you look at the facts and figures released by the EU on the importance of the Asia-Europe meeting, ASEM, the 51 countries in ASEM constitute 60% of global population, 65% of global GDP, and 55% of global trade. From these facts and figures, it is clear that the EU and Asia hold great stakes in the international economic order and share a common interest in global stability and development. It is therefore important for participants to be engaged in understanding the current state of EU-Asia relations, dissecting the different strengths and layers of cooperation between EU and Asia, from bilateral ties that the EU establishes with its Asian partners to inter-regional cooperation between the EU and ASEAN, and of course, dialogue through multilateral platforms such as the Asia-Europe meeting process. It is inevitable that within such a diverse continent as Asia and an EU of 27 member states, different interests and priorities exist. But they should not be seen just as stumbling blocks towards deeper cooperation. Instead, as long as there's common appreciation of how ultimately our survival and future are intertwined, we should and we must garner that political will to work through our differences and find ways to strengthen our partnership for a better future. And this is where young scholars like you, researchers and policy practitioners have the responsibility to seek the knowledge, expand their horizons and understanding, engage in dialogue and discussions to arrive at mutual understanding and deeper appreciation of the conditions and constraints that we face and how to overcome them. We all need to equip ourselves with the knowledge and the critical thinking skills to make a very clear-eyed assessment of where our interests converge and how to work together to create an inclusive, sustainable, shared future. I hope this winter school will make a small contribution towards this important mission of strengthening EU-Asia cooperation. Let me end here by wishing all participants of the winter school a week of stimulating lectures, discussions, and debates, and that they will continue to contribute to the thinking, the writing, and working on strengthening the EU-Asia relations even after the winter school is over. Thank you and all the best.
Thank you very much, Levi, for those opening remarks. And of course, we'll see you again on the 14th and 15th, where we'll have panel discussions with you and other scholars as well. Yatharth, may you want to pitch in? You're muted, Yatharth.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you so much. I welcome all of you to this winter school, which me and Priya, along with Dr. Hwee, has curated. It's a very intensive 6-day winter school we have planned. And after what Dr. Inamdar and Dr. Hwee has, they have set the context, there is not much which I can, which is left to cover for me. But as a researcher and a keen observer of the international politics, there are a few things I can think of while looking at EU-Asia relations, especially in the context of largely overshadowed part of this region and in this dynamic that is South Asia. Now, with the rise of Indo-Pacific, as Dr. Inamdar has also pointed out, the center of gravity in world politics has shifted. In that background, the importance of South Asia in this EU-Asia relations dynamic, it cannot be overstated. Major powers like China, Russia, US, and even middle players like Turkey, they're already going through a power tussle to gain a foothold in the region. Now, in this background somewhere, it is very critical, very imperative that EU must increase its engagement with the region. But while doing so, what I feel is that there are a few things, which it should not do. Within South Asia, there have always been overloaded expectations from the EU, and vice versa in EU. There are certain misperceptions about the region. So that's why it is all the more important that both sides, while framing policies towards each other, while engaging more with each other, refrain from taking certain approaches, which for one, I think for the EU, if I could say, it should somewhere refrain from returning to the old interventionist human rights, sanctions, democratic agenda of the 2000s. It should refrain from taking that kind of extreme approach towards the region. In principle, what it means is basically the concept of responsibility to protect, through which previously EU had pushed very hard in countries like Nepal, in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar also. Now, bringing that approach back is more likely to result in a major pushback from the countries within the region and may not prove very beneficial for the EU's image around the subcontinent. Another thing, while doing so, taking this extreme approach, which I feel is that it should also avoid taking somewhere a neutralist approach, as well as trade-only, business-only approach, which includes development cooperation just and not get into political and strategic agenda. That will also not work somewhere in its favor. Because first of all, such an approach, such a position is nothing less than a myth. Now, anything that EU has done, the most technical cooperation, it has always embedded in the political context. There is always a normative, a political impetus to what EU does. A democratic impetus, a multilateral impetus, values integral to the EU always gets transferred in the ways EU has recommended, it has funded, it has engaged with the initiatives worldwide. I think I'll end it here. I think our guest, Mr. Rinaldi, has joined us. I would love to continue with this, a few more things on this particular issue, maybe at the end, as we move towards the end of the session. Priya?
Yeah, thank you so much, Yathat, and very happy that Mr. Rinaldi has joined us. He was having some technical issues, so it took a while. A very warm welcome, Mr. Rinaldi. You are muted, I see.
You hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you very well. So,
yes, good afternoon, everybody. Apologies for being late, but the thing is that I'm speaking from my office in the European Parliament in Brussels. The premises of the Parliament opens at 7:30 a.m. here in Brussels, and it takes some time, unfortunately, more than expected, to actually make the whole system operating, connecting, switching on the computer, the different system, charging the database, and so on. So I apologize for this late. I would like to thank you, first of all, for the very kind invitations to join you this afternoon from Brussels to Manipal. As has been said, my name is Niccolò Rinaldi. I'm the head of the unit for Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, basically the unit department that in the European Parliament covers 31 countries from Iran up to New Zealand. So a very vast region of the world that we cover with a number of dedicated desk officers following individual countries or specific regions here in the European Parliament. Previously, I have been a member of the European Parliament between 2009 and 2014, and I've been a draft person for the free trade agreement between the EU and India, and the free trade agreement between the EU and Malaysia. And even before that, I was again civil servants of the European Union and also the United Nations. I served in Afghanistan for a couple of years between 2000, long time ago, 89 until 1991. So I mentioned those few bio tips because I would like to make it clear that my interest in Asia has always been there. I mean, since the very beginning of my professional commitment. And my role in the United Nations as Member of Parliament, as EU civil servant, has always been to try to contribute to bridging Asia and Europe. In a way, this is something that I'm happy to share with the students of Manipal, notably at the very beginning of your semester, which is going certainly to be very challenging and I hope exciting. Take it as something which is plenty of intellectual issues. Because there is nothing which is more, in my humble opinion, nothing which is more exciting than trying to develop from an academic point of view, an institutional point of view, a political point of view, a cultural, creative, artistic point of view, a common ground between two great civilizations and two huge economic areas, such as the European Union and India, and at large, the Indo-Pacific region, where India, of course, has a prominent role. It is an easy task, and at the same time, it is a difficult one. If we look at the importance of the Indo-Pacific region, it is clear that now everything is depending from this very vast region. Trade, the quantity of cargo which is processed through the Indo-Pacific seas, the different logistic hubs in the regions where the products manufactured in Asia and then dispatched over all the world are actually originating from, but also in terms of political willingness, the kind of very affirmative, strong, assertive policies that a number of countries in the region are expressing, in which have an impact well behind the region as such, the demographic issues, and also the security and military tensions which are there. So much is taking place. You know, when I basically was at your age, when I was at 19, 20, 25, etc., the world was basically divided, at least from the Western European perception, but also the Eastern European perception, between the America, Western allies on one side, and Russia and communist allies on the other side. And the perception, right or wrong, was that America was somehow the inspiring center of the world. That was where the best university center were. That was the place where the best movies were coming from. That was the place where trends in a number of social habits were originating, and so on. Now the whole thing is completely shifted, and the focus, I mean, that kind of inspirations, impact, influence on people is coming from Asia and from this huge region, the Indo-Pacific. There is much less, at least in Europe, attractions on America, which is certainly still a major superpower, but again, the focus, even in terms of society, is certainly looking to East. We say in Latin, lux ex oriente, so light comes from the East, and that was a very well-known expressions in the Roman old Roman world. So when we look to different challenges that the European Union has to undertake, very little can be done without a strong partnership with Asian countries. Climate issue is one of them. Providing a better trade, rules-based world trade is just notably with Asia. Trying to provide security for our planet, while we do have a lot of threats coming from North Korea, Iran, the Taiwan Straits, and so on. Issues such as human rights, now they're much focused on what's happening in China, of course, in Myanmar, in Cambodia, and Kazakhstan those days, and so on. It is not by surprise that what was probably the most important international event last year took place again in Asia, in Afghanistan, with all the consequences that what happened in Kabul and in the rest of the country had for all of us, both in India and in the European Union. So it's not difficult to picture the Indo-Pacific region and Asia in particular as the key point, the crucial strategic area where academics, politics, institutions, business have to focus and to work together. At the same time, there is always a paradox here, and it is difficult. It's not easy on the other side to work between in the relationship between Asia and Europe, because there is still the legacy of a fundamental misunderstanding of Europe from Europe about Asia. If we just read the very vast literature that was so much popular in Europe in the 19th century, and I would say until probably the times of independence of Asian countries, so right after the Second World War. It is a literature where Asia, individual Asian countries, and Asia as such is pictured in a way where basically there is this still superiority complex from the Europeans. And at the same time, there is very little knowledge of the Asian culture, the Asian civilizations, the great contributions that individually each country of Asia gave to the rest of the world, etc. So the message has always been for centuries, from the religious authorities through to the business people, from the traders to the diplomats, that Asia was somehow to be educated by the West, and this is something which is by far gone, of course. It's a legacy of the past, but still, I mean, there is always some kind of prejudice and some kind of fundamental ignorance that we need to address here in Europe about misinterpretations of Asia and Asian countries, individual Asian countries as such. The Europeans have always been very good in promoting their own values, their own society models, and so on. They've always been very good also in picking up a number of specific issues, which can be a spiritual legacy, Indian food, or of course trade with some products, etc. But still maintaining this position of some kind of superiority legacy. And also in terms of values or the efficiency of the institutions and so on, which is something which is increasingly, of course, challenged by the events in the Asia-Europe relationship, but also when we address other regions of the world. It is not by chance, probably, that it has been last year, and I would say only last year, that the European Union has adopted a strategy about the Indo-Pacific region. That was something that was started from by some member states, the Netherlands, France, and Germany. They had adopted their own strategy about the Indo-Pacific region. So the issue then became a European one, and last September, the EU launched this institutional framework, which was been matter of discussion between the External Action Services, the Commissions, the European Parliament. I mean, all the different institutional bodies here in Brussels have contributed to the shaping of this ambitious strategy, which, in my opinion, is a very important step, because it's the very first attempt to put all different pillars of our relationship under one single umbrella, and to try to have a coherent, consistent approach to Asia. And not just to Asia, also to the Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, and the smaller island states in the regions. I could go through all the different chapters of these strategies and the goals of these strategies, but probably I think it's more interesting for you, because these documents are easily available online, to share with you a number of fundamental interrogation points, issues, questions that were raised during the shaping of this strategy. One, for instance, has been to which extent this strategy is a positive choice. It is something that Europe does because we want to engage with Asia and Pacific from our own perspective, or it is reactions to the China actions and overactions, probably in world relationship, etc. So are we doing this because we believe in our partnership with Asia, or it is just a sort of a counter-offensive on all the different diplomatic, trade, scientific actions that China is undertaking and has been undertaking for the past years. When we look at the content of the strategy, I would say that actually China is certainly an issue, but the strategy is not conceived at all to be something hostile to China or to contain China's initiatives in the regions, but it is something that try to put also our own relationship with China, which somehow are controversial in some occasions. Currently, the European Parliament is having some diplomatic embargo with the Chinese. We are not allowed anymore to have official visits because we voted for some. We did ask, and then we obtained as European Parliament from the European Council, the EU Council, individual sanctions against a number of Chinese officials that we believe have an active role on the systematic repressions of the Uyghurs populations in Xinjiang. So we believe that the Indo-Pacific strategy is a way to put our relationship with China in a broader context and to do a lot of positive things with the major key players, including China, of course, but not just focusing on a specific bilateral relationship, but to try, as the topic of your session today is, to work with tools that are there to cope with a multipolar order. And the multipolar order, it is not simply Europe or Asia. It is a number of different countries and powers in Asia. Each of them has their own peculiarity, and also, to some extent, that's also true in Europe. Notably now that the United Kingdom is out of the European Union. Another issue, which was certainly a matter of great debate, it was to which extent a strategy towards such a complicated region needs to have also a security, and why not? I mean, let's not be afraid of the word military component, or should be rather focused only on trade, cultural cooperations, scientific joint research programs, and so on. There were different approaches by the member states on the role that security and the military dimension should have in this strategy. But at the end, it has been agreed that the EU, which is in our own, because of our own willingness, we wish to be so a soft power, a power that traditionally is not really there to provide security to military security to countries, although we have a lot of military and defense missions across the world. It has been agreed that the military security component should be also there in this strategy. We, after all, as not just as European, but European with Asians, have been working to provide, for instance, protections for with the Atlanta mission, so for the cargo shipping through the coast of Somalia, the Red Sea, and also through the Indian Ocean. A number of Asian countries actually joined the Atlanta mission, which was an important EU maritime protection mission based in Djibouti, but from Djibouti, I mean, operating in the vast regions. And we are pretty aware that South China Sea is so hot in terms of tensions, and the Taiwan Straits are also extremely delicate as regions. But again, the added value of a strategy is not to neglect any component, but to put all components as much as possible together in one consistent approach. So a military security approach just by itself, in our opinion, will never work. That's actually the options that other countries operate. They focus foreign policy notably on security military cooperations. We see now what's happening in Kazakhstan, for instance. That's very clear. We see the actions of a number of countries in some African countries. That's also very clear, etc. So it's for us, this is not really going to work if a security component is not part of a much broader political approach. Such a strategy can work only if, on the other side, of course, there is a partner. And let me say that my experience here in Brussels is that in recent times, there is, I could not really say surprisingly, but certainly it's amazing to see in recent years the degree of interest from key actors in Asia on the EU and the European Parliament as a single individual institutions, but the EU dimension as such. We have clear a very different approach from a number of countries. When we met, we meet, as you can easily understand, we meet on a regular basis. Indonesians, Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Australians, Indians, of course, etc., etc. I mean, we entertain relationship with all those countries, the 31 countries that we cover on a very regular basis at different levels. Maybe 15 years ago, with most of those partners, the discussion was focused notably on trade, economic issues, sometimes visa migration issues, and what could be maybe the most advanced level of discussion was peoples-to-peoples cooperation, which included also university cooperation, exchange students, Erasmus Mundus, this kind of stuff. Since not many years, the climate has dramatically changed, I have to say. It's amazing to see the Japanese, who, for instance, have been always somehow reluctant to engage in political issues, because the foreign policy, notably with the EU as such, was based on economic interest. It is now for the Japanese, to see the Japanese so much advocating political cooperation, coordination in the United Nations, coordinations whenever there is an international conference on climate, on cybersecurity, or different things, to see how they're keen in enhancing cooperation for scientific programs on very, very crucial and sensitive issues, which can be remote control systems, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, again, and so on. So it is this, what's happening with Japanese is happening also with the Indians, and is happening with the Indonesians, is happening with the Australians, and so on. There has been in recent years, but not since many years, so it's a relatively recent phenomena, in my opinion, an upgrading of the kind of debate, discussions, and issues that the two sides wish to have. And we are not in a shortage of potential partners as European Union, to say so. We need to be able to bridge in a significant, adequate way with all those partners. And this is not always easy for us. You have, and I'm addressing you as a university, which is an excellence in EU-India or an EU-Asian relationship, as it is in Manipal, as one of the different, but certainly important interlocutors, actors, that they do have a role in helping the EU in finding its own place in the world, the current world scenario. Do never forget that the European Union is still a relatively new project, which for many years has focused, and I would say in a very successful way, on domestic issues. Because now we have an internal EU legislations on environmental standards, regional policy, agricultural, fishery, industrial issues, of course, freedom of circulation for citizens, social issues, etc., etc. That proved to make a huge difference for our citizens. But at the same time, the European Union has been less successful or less active, or there was less energy to focus on in its own external relationship. We started with the Lisbon Treaty by really creating a strong legal basis for trade, EU trade action. But on issues such as foreign policy and security policies, we are still working out our own means. And that's, I have to say, it's a wonderful, fascinating project, because we always have the sensations, that feeling that we are doing something new, which is, for the time being, incomplete, which is still a work in progress, which is something that still has to reach the point of a solid degree of efficiency and effectiveness, and we still have to reach that point. The partner has to help us in a way. by trusting us, by giving us also the kind of request, we need Europe, we need one single European voices, not 27 different single voices. We can do so much together. You can make as European a positive difference in a number of political areas, etc. And I have to say, countries such as India, Korea, Japan, Indonesia, just to mention a few of them, but I mentioned the most important ones, with these strategic partner status are certainly countries that are playing a very important issues also to enable the Europeans to be more self-confident in our own external actions. We always struggle with the dimensions of being a very important economic power. In many of Asian countries, we are by far the first trade partners, the first investors, and so on, even before China in many countries. But at the same time, we are still perceived, and we also perceived ourselves as a soft powers with relatively underrated political dimensions and so on. Payers, but not players, as we always said in critical areas where Afghanistan is one of them, where we have been contributed with massive aid and very important cooperation programs, but on the other side, there has always been some difficulties in asserting a EU political dimension as such. Let me finish with notably because now with remarks on a different tone. Notably because this morning for me, I mean this afternoon for you, I'm talking to a dedicated group of students at the beginning of your classes for the next months. Politics is fine. Institutions, I mean, they have a huge role, etc. Strategic thinking is always, I mean, needed. And the fact that we have been able to shape this relationship on the Indo-Pacific strategy is certainly important. But nothing like that will ever work if we do not have what is a fundamental human and cultural respect between, I wouldn't say the two sides, because there are so many sides in a partnership between two huge regions, Europe and Asia. There is not just a simple European model and the single Asian models. I mean, Europe is a multipolar region as much as Asia is a multipolar region, as you might understand. I've been in India, for instance, many times. I visited your country tens of times, and I cannot pretend to know well India, but certainly I've always been intrigued to speak with Europeans that I met in India or in Europe, but I had visited your countries, and asking Europeans who are not working on India, maybe tourists or also business people who have occasional opportunity to work with India. I mean, what they like about India, what they're impressed, what is the kind of feedback they bring from India. You know, many of them, I always been surprised but actually it makes sense. I mean, many of them pointed out that what they like, what they've been impressed in a country such as in India is the multicolor visibility of the Indian society. So how, I mean, remember, it was actually a business person. He said, that's the first country I see, and people, they color their own skin, they color animals. The clothes are so beautiful and fashionable with all these explosions and combination of different colors. That's so beautiful compared to much more rigid fashion or design habits that we do have in Europe. So there is a beauty which is there and needs to be exploited in our relationship. At the same time, another issues that always come up when talking about, for instance, India, but that's not just India, also other Asian countries, not all of them, as you can easily understand, is the kind of very lively dimension of the society. The people in the street, the people, the crowds, the very vocal interconnections between families, communities, and so on. What we could define in a very simple way with the liberty, with the freedom of the people. And that, of course, brings some Asian countries and the Europeans very much close together, because there is a fundamental sharing of values, and freedom is so important. I mean, probably the most important value that we are attached to. And then, in a previous meeting I had with your university, I mentioned a Florentine traveler in the 16th century, Filippo Sassetti, that we're talking about 16th century. 16th century was a century where Europeans come to India, exploited all possible trade opportunities, destroyed the mosque and Hindu temples to build their own churches. They forced Brahmin to convert to Christianity, and there was, I mean, a strong fundamental conceptions that Europe was superior and has to bring civilizations to even to India. I mean, how insane that looks to today, but that was the history of European imperialism in India, like in many other countries. I mean, this Florentine traveler, Filippo Sassetti, liked India, settled in Goa, married with an Indian, probably one of the very first to marry there, and he made a very important discovery. It was the very first one who wrote establishing the fact that the European languages and the Indian language comes from the same source, the Indo-European languages. He made some analysis of the roots of different words, and basically comes to the conclusions that we have the same origin in terms of language. And if the languages come from the same source, the peoples and the fundamental origin of civilization come from the same source. At that time, that was absolutely a revolutionary approach to the India-European relationship. So what I was to say is that it's very important for people like me working in institutions to establish a partnership well based on legal basis, a strategy which are adopted, which have been thought and shaped by a number of actors, etc., etc. But that's not going to work if our society do not establish their own relationship on three factors, which are the factors I just mentioned you with few examples. The factors of beauty, the factors of freedom, values, and the factor of history and knowledge of our history. Beauty can be found in Europe, can be found in Asia, can be found in India. I mentioned the colors issue because it's always been striking to me how European travelers, visitors to India report this back home. Values are absolutely important, and India and other Asian countries share with 2 days Europe, not certainly 50 years or 60 years or 70 years old Europe, the issue of liberty and the knowledge of history like, for instance, establishing the fact that our languages come from the very single source are fundamental. Without that, nothing can actually be achieved. If I can tell you, give you an advice, we are now on the 10th of January 2022. You're very young. I mean, you're students at the beginning of your career. In a way, it could be interesting for you to remember what you are doing today, our meeting, and of course the coming semester. Write down in a small piece of paper what you think it's the relationship, the status of the relationship between the Asia, India, and the European Union, and then put somewhere. Take it out in 10 years' time, or in 20 years' time, or like I can do with my own memories on my own personal notes 40 years ago. So take it out in 40 years, and you will see how different the world will be changing compared to 2022, how fast and how amazing and how surprisingly those changes can take place. I hope those changes will be positive, not necessarily. It's up to you also to make those changes positive, and it's also up to you to play a role in those changes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rinaldi, for your eloquent remarks. You have very comprehensively laid down in front of us the changing global order, the rising importance of Indo-Pacific, challenges in dealing with China, and why we require a strong partnership with Asian countries, why Europe requires a strong partnership, why we, both the regions, need each other. I'm also glad that somewhere you also touched upon this superiority legacy and the perceptions and misperceptions between the two regions. Just before you joined in, I was talking about the same issue, what Europe, what EU perhaps should refrain from, what kind of approach it should not take while dealing with Asian countries. You have touched that very well, but I must say that for South Asia, also Asia, and specifically for South Asia as well, misperceptions are somewhere both ways. There is always a temptation within this region also to push the EU or to push the EU away, to give it a very hard time. And I would say, why is that? Because somewhere EU comes with a complex system, its set of norms, its values, which we still are not able to grasp fully. However, it is in the interest of the countries within the region to engage with the widest range of diverse actors, including EU. Also, there are certain things which we within the region needs to understand that the EU brings to what EU brings to the table, and how it is different from, let's say, other actors, let's say Japan, let's say Australia. It brings with it the importance of multilateralism and regional cooperation, which is very much embedded in its DNA. And institutionalized cooperation, and not just bilateral cooperation. There is a lot we can learn from EU. Also, there is a tremendous potential for South Asian countries and for Asia as a whole to engage the EU at the level that goes beyond bilateral relations. EU has a specific comparative advantage as compared to other actors. It has a distinct political history. It has technical resources, a very clear thinking about the future of global governance. and multilateralism. And within that, regional institution and regional cooperation that it brings on the table. So with that, I would once again thank you very much. Dear colleagues and participants, we are now open to take a few questions for Mr. Rinaldi. If you have any questions, please post it in the chat box. You can also raise your hand, unmute yourself and speak. But before we do that, I request you to introduce yourself before asking the questions, and please keep your questions very brief. So as participant starts posing the question, I would like to take this opportunity to maybe begin with what I have in mind. You spoke, you touched upon almost every important issue within EU-Asia relation. What I would like you to ask is about India. Of course, India-EU relation in recent times have crossed a certain threshold. There is a new energy, there is a new momentum, a new impetus in the relationship. Could you please tell us that, what has changed in the recent past and what can we expect in the future, in the next few years? How do you see this momentum going forward? What are the prospects do you see unfolding, and what are some of the challenges that we still face in our relationship?
Mrs. Carr, your question is about notably India and Europe rather than Asia on Europe. Listen, when I said before that it's very important that the EU strategy on Indo-Pacific is a positive choice, and it is not simply a reaction to contain China's expansions in the region, but well beyond the region. And I come to the conclusions that in any case, our position is clear on that, and it is a proactive policy and certainly not a way to circumvent China's enthusiasm, so to say. I wish that this approach is also the approach of notably of India. That the partnership that India is actively seeking with the EU, it is because there is a genuine per se interest in joining forces with the European Union, and not simply because India is trying to have allies in the world scenario in the international community to contain its own worries about Chinese expansions, political expansions. If this is the point, which I do believe is the point, but again, I come to the issues I mentioned before, because it's going to work, it is something that needs to be well rooted in the public opinion, in the citizens, in a feeling that our different society components have each other. I believe so much can be done between the two sides. What would be in the near future challenges and objectives that can be actually achieved, if I well understood your questions? We do have the two, the European Union and India, we do have, for instance, a huge potential in terms of research, scientific research capacity. all the scientific community is very well aware of the importance, the added value of joint programs. We have experienced that within the European Union, of course, and certainly it will be a crucial issue to develop as much as possible with India. Just let me share with you a statistic which is not accurate. So don't quote me, because it's not easy to have accurate data about this issue, but roughly speaking is correct. China is investing on artificial intelligence 300 billions dollars. United States are investing in artificial intelligence about 1/3 of this amount, $100 billion. Of course, China has to fill a gap, and so needs to invest more than the US, which have already a solid and established position. The European Union is investing in artificial intelligence something like $10 billion. I don't know how much India is investing on artificial intelligence, but we all know that in 20 years' time, the ones who will have the patents on artificial intelligence devices that are going to be used in logistics, in public health, in security system, in manufacturing process, etc., will be by a large extent the leaders of the world. This is something on which the Europeans, the Americans, and certainly the Indians have to work together, I believe. And you have a huge capacity in addressing these issues. That should be certainly a priority. We have been target of cybersecurity attack. India too. This is, for instance, an issue that we are discussing very seriously with the Koreans and with the Japanese. They are extremely concerned about that. And they do have the know-how, but still they see how it's important to have operational cooperation made on common standards, sharing of information, joint scientific, again, programs to tackle cybersecurity together and so on. And India should be fully a part of this exercise. There are issues which are very crucial in terms of security, both in the regions. Afghanistan is certainly one of them. South China Sea is another one, but also elsewhere where Indian interests are at stake. Africa is an obvious location for discussing this. And the EU is now increasingly opening its own military missions to third countries, where the third countries join these military missions, not in a subordinate position at all, but as a full partner of those military and security missions. As I mentioned the case with you before, Koreans joined the Atlanta missions, but we do have Mongolians, for instance, joining some security missions in some part of the world, EU security missions in some part of the world. And this is something that has never really been explored with India, which has a strong, huge military tradition and power, but it will be extremely important to do with starting with something maybe with limited importance, but symbolically will be also a signal, very important to the rest of the world. There is the issue then, which is an obvious one, of the free trade agreement between the EU and India. As I told you, I was the draft person between 2009 and 2014, and as member of parliament, and the free trade agreement never materialized. It has been materialized with Singapore, with Japan, with Vietnam, and South Korea. just to mention countries in Asia, and is very close to the conclusions for New Zealand and Australia. It's a pity that we are still not able to conclude this free trade agreement, because that would be a huge way to boost the economic relationship, the mutual investments, and so on. And on that, I have to say the Chinese are far more active on having rules-based mutual investments and trade relations. They are not scared at all of discussing these issues and of coming up with a single frame of rules to regulate our trade. Again, I do believe that the peoples-to-peoples cooperation make a huge difference in establishing the relationship. The Europeans have been so much close to the United States because of the legacy of the Second War, because of a number of historical roots which were very clear. The migrants, European migrants in the States, etc., the generosity of the Americans with the European after the war, the capacity of providing security vis-a-vis the Soviets, etc. But nothing has been more powerful in establishing a strong partnership between the European and the Americans than the attractiveness of some kind of American model, right or wrong, in European society. And we go back to the values, the beauties, the history, and those dimensions that are meta-political, so to say. They are not discussed in a political framework, but are so important and can be discussed between creators, universities, peoples-to-peoples connections, etc. And whatever we do on those issues between India and European Union can just be positive, because there is a mutual attractions by definition, I would say. So much can be done, and so much should be done, much more than what is currently on place. But we can build with a very strong convictions that we are certainly on the good track, and compared to a few years ago, the number of positive changes and upgrading of relationship is certainly amazing.
Thank you, Mr. Rinaldi. We have quite a few questions lined up for you. A very interesting question on 17+1 grouping by Anand Nair. Anand, could you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. So good morning, Niccolò sir. My name is Anand Nair, and the question that I had is, given that some EU nations are also the members of the 17+1 economic group, the cooperation group between China and the Eastern European nations, is it of concern to the relative peace and stability and the way the EU really functions, or the EU organizations function as a whole, given that the very platform of CEEC, the China and the CEEC act as a gateway to the Chinese or increased Chinese influence to the European nations as a whole? So what is your take on that?
Should we take all the questions together, or we'll try to reply one by one?
Oh, we can take all the questions together. Hitesh, maybe another hand I can see here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good morning, sir. I'm Hitesh. I'm a student of social and cultural anthropology at KU in Belgium. And my question to you is, how does rising populism in the European Union, specifically in a few European countries and India with increasing ultra-nationalist leaders, interplay in EU-Asia relations, and specifically with rising Islamophobia in both EU and India? Thank you.
There are also a few questions in the chat box. Maybe we can take them as well. So I think Aditya asked the question. It's connected to the first question, of course. China's pushback. I mean, the recent incident where, you know, Lithuania pushback against Chinese pushback against Lithuania, which has blocked all imports. Do we see this? Are we going to expect tougher, coercive reaction from the EU? Is what Aditya asked. Maybe these questions and Mr. Rinaldi.
Yeah, I'm actually reading the questions on the chat so that I can. Yeah, okay. Starting from the first questions, the 17 plus one. No, I don't think it's a major issue for the European Union. It is perfectly understandable. Probably it's not perfect, but it's perfectly understandable in a community of 27 countries that there is not only a plurality of national interest or diplomacies, but also of different traditions and sensitivities, also because the kind of coalitions in government in each of our countries are very different. So it's not easy to make, I mean, the synthesis of all of that. And the degree of interdependence with China from the European Union is so deep that I wouldn't say it's a surprise that some countries have closer relationship with China, and but at the same time, I don't think it's going to disrupt the fundamental European stand with China. I'll give you one example. You are perfectly aware that the comprehensive agreement on investment between the EU and China has been signed by the Council. It was a unanimous decision by the 27 countries, but then it has been put on hold, and there is no progress whatsoever on the ratification of these agreements by the European Parliament. And in the European Parliament, the position on freezing this very important agreement, which was very much wanted by countries such as Germany, so countries that can also have a critical approach on China. The decision that has been taken by the European Parliament has basically been taken almost on unanimous basis. So the fact that some countries have a seat in the 17+1, I frankly don't really see as an issue in complicating the life of the EU institutions when they do have to come to actual decision on China in these cases. Of course, there has been and there are worries about China's specific investments, notably in logistical sectors in some member states. But I have to say this is a fact of life. And it applies to China, it applies to other countries, other partners in the world, whenever they touch sensitive sectors. And this is, again, is not simply something which is related to China, and is not even something which is always related to the usual suspects among the EU member states. Overall, although it's not perfect, I see the EU system well able to cope as one single team. Maybe there is here and there some differentiation, something that can be actually not really fills the full picture, etc. But it's not affecting the capacity of the EU to play as one single trade and economic actor vis-a-vis China. On the other side, it can be even instrumentally useful to have some of us, so to say, sitting in that forum, because we can channel some messages, or we can receive some information, and we can make some kind of influence, possibly, etc. I see another questions about Iran. Yes, that has been hugely discussed here. The fact that Iran belongs to the Asian department, so to say, not to the Middle East department. And to some extent, that has been also a matter of doubts, and it can change in the future. Iran is a bridging country. Iran is a country that is very much connected to Syria, to Iraq, to Palestine, to Israel, to Yemen, to the Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsula. So it's more Middle East rather than Asia, but at the same time, Iran is a country that has strong interest in Afghanistan, in Central Asia. It's a country that is also quite active in the Indian Ocean, etc. So it's not easy to locate Iran in a perfect way in the map, and also not to trap Iran as simply a Middle East country, which is that our attention to Iran is linked to its role on again, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, etc. We believe that Iran should be part of the broader picture. And by the way, it's a very important country per se, and it plays a multi-regional role, also very active in the international community, UN circles, and so on, with all the kind of positions that we know. I understand the question, which is the questions we have ourselves, but again, is a multi-faced country, also in terms of geopolitical locations. EU, Lithuania, well, yes, there is certainly a number of decisions that has been taken by the EU, including by the European Parliament, to show our solidarity with Lithuania. There has been a number of declarations. I frankly do not understand what the Chinese want to, what the Chinese can believe to achieve with this kind of punishment approach to Lithuania. Because the EU once again works with one single group of countries, one single block of countries. As I told you, we are currently under no official relationship status with China in the European Parliament, and the approach of the Chinese with Vilnius is simply confirming that kind of approach from our side. The Parliament is holding the process of something that the Chinese are very keen to have, which is this comprehensive agreement on investment. And again, the approach they're having with Lithuania is certainly not spinning up the reopening of this chapter. When you say, can we expect the EU to take a tougher stance against such a coercive tactics? Well, that's a legitimate question. But what we really means with tougher stance, what can actually we do rather than blocking any kind of upgrading politically or again agreements with China. We, like with India or like with Japan or like with the Americans, we have a lot of interdependence with the Chinese. which is also the same kind of paradox we have with the Russians. We have very complicated political relations and sanctions on the two sides with Russia, but at the same time we still have, and I would say it's very good that we still have a lot of economic relationship with Russia, starting from energy, because that's also a channel of communication. It's a channel of mutual understanding. It's a channel which is very useful to not radicalize our individual positions and to build up possible better relationship in the future. The issue of populism in Europe is certainly a matter of huge concern. But compared to what was the situation 5-10 years ago, I would say that for the time being, it is an issue, I would say, not only under control from the electoral point of view, but also that has not really provoked too many damage to the European projects and also to the relationship between European unions and Asian countries, including Islamic countries. Populism has been strong in France, has been strong in Italy, has been strong in Denmark, has been strong in Germany, but they never really come to power. And once in some countries, briefly in Italy, Austria, populist parties acceded to governmental positions. Their actually government decisions were not really so much different from previous traditional established way to approach. So clearly, when you know, we all know that very well. I mean, when there is a moment of social distress, a time of social distress in a society, there is always some kind of external enemies that we have to put the fingers to. The fact that Europe, several European countries suffer terrorism, which was originated with some kind of Islamic, pretended Islamic label, certainly has not helped in the public opinion, and has been easily exploited by right-wing, but not only right-wing politicians, and it was somehow unavoidable. But my impression, my strong conviction is that this is an issue that in Europe is not a major problem at all. We do have still, for instance, a lack of adequate representations in the institutions of European citizens of Islamic religions. Very few members of parliament, very few ministers. There are, but not in an adequate way. It takes time. We know much more should be done. But overall, the process of integration, although with a lot of contradictions, is in its own way. And we should not make too much publicity to the populists by picturing them more powerful than they actually are. I shouldn't be maybe so blunt, but in a way, the mood of the public opinion in our countries, and in India it's the same. It can change very quickly. And if there is somebody who's now is as external element perceived as hostile or controversial, probably is not anymore the Islamic element, but it's more the Chinese element as such. So the reputation, the blame goes quickly from one external actors to another.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rinaldi. I see a lot of questions lined up for you, but I'm afraid due to lack of time, we can not take any more questions. We have already exceeded our time by almost 10 minutes, and we have next session lined up at 2 p.m. IST. For the winter school participants, next 6 days are going to be very extensive for you. It will give you a platform to engage with some very well-known resource person on a wide range of relevant and topical issues ranging from maritime security, climate, health, connectivity, trade. So we expect that you make best use of this opportunity. With this, we have almost reached at the end of the session. We will take a half an hour break before we meet at 2:10 p.m. IST instead of 2 for the ice-breaking session with our winter school participants. I request all of you to please join at least 10 minutes prior to the scheduled time. The idea of the ice-breaking session is to get to know our winter school participants a little more before we completely jump into this super intensive 6-day winter school. With this, I would like to thank our esteemed guests and speakers, Mr. Rinaldi, Dr. Hwee, our own Dr. Neeta Inamdar, and all other colleagues who are here with us today. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rinaldi.
Yeah. See you.
Thank you, all of you.
Thanks so much for
And
me.
best wishes for your next months of teaching.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.